What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. Today, I'm doing another NASCAR silly season update, recapping everything that has happened so far for the 2024 and 2025 NASCAR silly season, and talk about all the potential moves that could happen this upcoming silly season. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. Let's first talk about Stewart-Haas racing. There's been a lot of talk conversation surrounding Stewart-Haas racing throughout this silly season so far. There's a lot of talk and chatter that Stewart-Haas racing could be downsizing in 2025. They could be downsizing to as far as a 2-car organization. We've heard at first it was a 3-car organization for next year, but we're even hearing now there's a potential possibility that Stewart-Haas racing could downsize to a 2-car operation for the 2025 season. With the fact that Stewart-Haas Racing will no longer more than likely be a Tier 1 organization with Ford, and there's a chance they can merge as well, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, they're likely going to use their Tier 1 support. So that will mean, because a lot of these teams that are 4-car teams don't do well when they're not a Tier 1 team, I expect Stewart-Haas Racing to potentially downsize. There's also been a lot of talk that Stewart-Haas Racing could switch manufacturers. Some have listed Chevrolet potentially, and even Honda's been mentioned, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But it sounds like Stewart-Haas Racing could potentially be downsizing as early as this year, and they might be downsizing from a 4-car organization down to maybe a 3 or 2-car organization going into this season. Now let's talk about Honda. Throughout this offseason as well and throughout the season, there has been a lot of talk that Honda could be joining NASCAR in the next couple of years. With the potential possibility of hybrids coming into play as early as 2026, Honda could make the join and jump. They've been rumored for the last few years that they could make the jump to NASCAR, and it sounds like they are in serious talks and conversations and in pretty deep talks and negotiations about joining the sport. There are some teams like Chip Ganassi Racing that could come back as well if Honda joins, but also we can see teams like Spire or Call or even SHR switch over to Honda. Honda's in talks to maybe join the sport. Now let's talk about Martin Truex Jr. Every single year is always a talk conversation surrounding Martin Truex Jr., whether or not he's going to retire or if he is going to stick around. Martin Truex Jr. said early this season that he's still unsure what he's going to be doing for 2025. There has been some talk that Ryan Truex could potentially take over going into next year. If he does retire, Corey Heim or Sheldon Creed could take over, but Martin Truex Jr. may retire at the end of this year. There's a chance it could end up happening, and Martin Truex Jr. may retire, but he also could stick around as well next season. Then during Daytona 500 week, DJ Khaled spoke to NASCAR and media members, and he says he's interested in joining NASCAR. Obviously, I talked about Honda. If DJ Khaled was to join the sport, I would imagine he'd be working with Honda very closely. I think he's got some ties with Honda, if I'm not mistaken. So DJ Khaled is absolutely interested to join the sport. Another celebrity owner, he could get invested with the team in the future. Now let's talk about Daniel Suarez. After Daniel Suarez won the NASCAR Cup Series race at Atlanta, Justin Marks stated that Daniel Suarez was in a contract year with Trackhouse Racing. It sounds like Daniel Suarez will likely be returning to Trackhouse Racing if they do end up expanding, but like I said, it is a contract year for Daniel Suarez. His future is still a little bit uncertain currently at the moment, but if I were a betting man, more than likely Daniel Suarez is going to stay in the 99 car next year, but he's still technically a free agent going into this season. Now let's talk about Kurt Busch. There was some rumors and speculation from Kurt Busch himself at Las Vegas that he might be making a return. And we all thought that maybe with the third 2311 racing car that he could come back and drive in the sport once again. Kurt Busch has not raced since 2022, since his injury at Pocono. He was trying to make a comeback last year in 2023. It sounds like it may end up happening in the future if he can't get medically cleared. Obviously, he still has to be medically cleared. But I think Kurt Busch coming back would be cool, but obviously he still has to get medically cleared. Then during the early portion of the season, there was a lot of retirement rumors around Austin Dillon. Austin Dillon's been struggling so far in 2024, not having a great year. The last couple of years have really not gone well for Austin Dillon. There's a chance that Austin Dillon could retire at the end of this year or even as early as next year. His contract does go through next year if Richard Childress Racing, and I do think eventually he will take an executive role with Richard Childress Racing in the future. Austin Dillon may retire at the end of the next few seasons. Now let's talk about Andretti Global. There's been some chatter that Andretti Global and Michael Andretti is interested in joining NASCAR. Some are looking at that Spire Motorsports program because Gainbridge works with Andretti Global. And guess who, because Downtowns is the owner of Gainbridge and he's also co-owner of Andretti Global. So if Michael Andretti is to bring Andretti Global into NASCAR like he's trying with Formula One, I would think he would go work with Spire Motorsports. Now let's talk about RFK Racing. RFK Racing is among many of the organizations that's looking to expand, and during the Sebring weekend, RFK ambassadors were spotted in the IMSA paddock at Sebring. RFK said publicly they want to have a third car in 2025 potentially. There are some drivers in the lower series like a Riley Herbst, a Cole Custer, even Haley Deegan perhaps, which we'll talk about in just a little sec, and even Matt DiBenedetto, who I could see move up going into next year, but RFK Racing is looking to expand. Let's talk now about Matt DiBenedetto. Matt DiBenedetto has joined Viking Motorsports for the rest of the 2024 season, and it does sound like that he is looking to go full-time with Viking Motorsports in 2025. He had a deal signed with Kaulig Racing to run part-time early this year, but that deal sounds like it fell through. So it sounds like that Matt DiBenedetto is trying his best to run full-time with the Viking Motorsports group in the 2025 season, which would be pretty exciting for Matt DiBenedetto. Now let's talk about JTG Doherty Racing. A couple weeks ago it was reported that JT Doherty Racing could be losing Kroger, and Kroger could be leaving to head over to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025. There were rumors that maybe Trackhouse could be picking up the Kroger deal, but it sounds like that Kroger is headed over to JGR next year. If Kroger does go over there, Tad and Jody Kushector will be leaving JTG Doherty, which means there'll be some new ownership coming into play. It won't be the end of the team, but it sounds like Kroger is heading over to Joe Gibbs Racing next season. Now let's talk about Junior Motorsports. There's always that talk and conversations that Junior Motorsports could jump up to the Cup Series every year. And I think there's a lot of rumors, and there was a report a couple weeks ago that Junior Motorsports have been looking to jump up. But obviously the charter negotiations are still going on, and they still haven't made a decision whether or not they're going to make the jump up next year. It does sound like there may be an outside shot of it, and they could be a player in the silly season going into 2025. Now let's talk about Chase Briscoe. This is an option year for Chase Briscoe, though I do think there's a chance he does return to Stewart-Haas Racing next season. But Chase Briscoe, this is a contract year for him. He needs to do a lot better. He's been having a solid year in 2024, but this is, like I said, a contract year for him. But he does have that option year at SHR, and especially with the rumors of a merger going, he may return to this respective team next season. Now let's talk about Brody Kostecki. Brody Kostecki confirmed he will not be racing in NASCAR in 2024, but there is a chance he could return in 2025. If he is to make a return to NASCAR, it will be with Erebus or Richard Childress Racing. Erebus and Peter Adelton is rumored to be buying up the Erebus organization at this point, and if he does buy it up, I can see Brody Kostecki jumping over to NASCAR and coming stateside in the future. Then it was announced about a week or two ago that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has signed a 3-year contract extension with JTG Doherty Racing, driving the number 47 car. Like I mentioned with JT Doherty, it does sound like that they are going to be making some ownership changes, and Jody will likely not be back with JTG next season, but Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has signed a 3-year deal with JTG Doherty. Now let's talk about Ryan Preece. Over the weekend, there was a report that came out about a study group going on with Stewart-Haas Racing. And it sounds like that Ryan Preece more than likely will not be returning to SHR this upcoming season in 2025. Ryan Preece was left out of the study group, was frustrated about it. His performance has not been great. I am worried about Ryan Preece's future. I imagine that this is going to be the end of Ryan Preece at SHR in 2024, and this will be his last year with the team. Now let's talk about Haley Deegan. Haley Deegan's future is unknown in NASCAR past this year. She does have a multi-year deal with AM Racing, but she has been struggling so far this year. And I'm very worried that with the performances, she could lose her seat with AM. She could go cup racing in the future, but I would think that more than likely she could be out of the sport completely if she doesn't step up her performance. Yes, she brings sponsorship, but she has been struggling a lot this year. Let's move on and talk about Connor Zillage. Connor Zillage's future past 2024 is very interesting. He's been very impressive in the lower series and has been doing a great job coming up through the ranks. There's a lot of talk maybe he can move up full-time to Xfinity next year, depending on how he does with Junior Motorsports. He's been doing a great job in the lower series, has more truck series race scheduled, Spire. He's a phenom, and I expect Connor Zillage to be racing in NASCAR Xfinity potentially full-time as early as next year. Now let's talk about Hyundai. There's a report that came out earlier today from Adam Stern that Hyundai, along with Honda, is interested in joining NASCAR. But very similar to Honda, Hyundai has a stance in regards to the hybridization efforts. NASCAR is looking to go hybrid and lower sustainable fuels. They're looking to do that, and Hyundai, it would come in if hybrids become a big thing. We could see some teams switch over, like Spire Motorsports, or maybe a team like RFK Racing switches over. But Hyundai, it's cool to see a new manufacturer interested in joining the sport. We'll talk about them more later this week. Now let's move on and talk about Kaulig Racing. Kaulig Racing is a team that some have speculated that could sell charters at the end of this year. They've not performed very well so far in the Cup Series. They expanded really quickly, and their Xfinity program has been suffering because of it. I look at Trackhouse Racing, which we'll talk about in just a second, to be a team in the running to pick up the charters from Kaulig Racing, and I could see Kaulig Racing merging with Trackhouse Racing in the not-so-distant future. Speaking of Trackhouse Racing, we know they're looking to expand in 2025. They've talked about expanding to have 4 full-time entries for the 2025 Cup Series season, keeping Dale Suarez and, of course, Ross Chastain around in their respective rides, but bringing in, of course, Shane Van Gisbergen is in the lower series, and also bringing in the other drivers as well, like a Zane Smith, which will change things definitely for sure, but they're looking to expand to 4 full-time cars in 2025. Speaking of Shane Van Gisbergen, it does sound like he could be going full-time Cup racing in the 2025 season. Shane Van Gisbergen is a very talented driver, doing a really great job in the lower series. Going to run a really nice looking throwback, by the way, at Darlington. He's got a Cup race to schedule. It's expected that more than likely SVG will be a full-time Cup driver. He's got the sponsorship and funding, and with the thoughts of Trackhouse expanding, I think Shane Van Gisbergen will in fact be a full-time Cup driver in the 2025 season. Now let's move on to talk about a Toyota team, that being Legacy Motor Club. They're looking to expand according to reports from earlier today. Legacy's among the organizations looking to purchase maybe a Stewart-Haas racing charter. They've got drivers like Sheldon Creed and Corey Hyman, even Eric Almirola, who could be waiting in the wings to get a seat. Legacy wants to expand. Their team wanting to make moves. I know they've struggled a bit, but they got that 84 car. They could potentially expand as early as 2025. Let's move on to the other big Toyota team outside of JGR, and that's 2311 Racing. They're also looking to expand going into 2025. They're looking to have 3 full-time cars next year. Obviously, Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick are set for a very, very long time with the team. The big question is, if they do expand, who do they get for next year? They could go get someone like a Corey Hyde, move him up full-time, since he is a reserve driver for 2311. We could obviously see someone else come into play, like a Chandler Smith, if Chandler doesn't go over to Joe Gibbs Racing. And we could see other drivers out of nowhere, like a Carl Edwards coming out of retirement or something like that. Nonetheless, 2311 Racing is an organization that is looking to expand, and they might be doing that this upcoming season. Now let's move on and talk about Front Row Motorsports. Bob Pockets put out an article earlier today that Front Row Motorsports could potentially be merging with Stewart-Haas Racing in 2025. They could be a 4-car organization going into the 2025 season. Chase Briscoe, Josh Berry, Todd Gillen, and Noah Grayson could also be the organization. Of course, if Michael McDowell leaves, which we'll talk about in just a second. This came out of nowhere for a lot of people, including myself, considering the fact that Front Row just signed a Tier 1 deal with Team Penske. We know that there would be a line more than likely with Team Penske going forward. We know, like I said, that SHR is looking to downsize going into this year. It does sound like a merger could be happening in the not-so-distant future between Front Row Motorsports and Stewart-Haas Racing. This is just a rumor, but it sounds like there's some big moves happening in the not-so-distant future for a merger between Front Row and SHR. Speaking of Michael McDowell, it was mentioned in Bob Pockris' article that Michael McDowell could be a candidate for Spire Motorsports next year in 2025 if Zane Smith moves full-time into Trackhouse Racing. Spire is looking for more veteran experience, and while Zane Smith is a good driver, he's still relatively young. Spire is also still a relatively young team, so they're looking to expand full-time with him once again in 2025, which Michael McDowell going to Spire would be definitely interesting. He's been with Front Row for many years, but if Front Row SHR merges, I think Michael McDowell more than likely will be headed over there to Spire Motorsports maybe next season. Let's move on to the 21 car for Harrison Burton. It sounds like, according to Bob Pockers, that Harrison Burton will likely be out at the Wood Brothers in 2025. Harrison's been struggling. I've heard a lot of rumors and rumblings surrounding Harrison Burton's future. I'll say this, he could be out earlier than we originally thought. Harrison's been struggling this year. I expect Harrison Burton to be out of the Wood Brothers at the end of this year, and I think that announcement will be coming probably relatively shortly, and I think that probably will be happening soon where Harrison Burton is let go early, but he's expected to be out. I think Noah Gragson could be a candidate for that seat if Noah doesn't go to that front row merger. Obviously, we could see someone else come into play, but Harrison Burton likely out of the Wood Brothers at the end of this year. Let's talk about Chandler Smith. It sounds like Chandler Smith could be moving up in 2025. Chandler brings sponsorship and funding, and it sounds like the Martrick Jr., like I said, if he does end up retiring, that could be the driver that takes over the 19 car. Chandler's in line to take over and move up to the Cup Series full-time next year. He's been doing an amazing job in Xfinity, already 2 to 3 wins so far this year, and is the early championship favorite. He's one to watch for throughout the rest of the year. Let's talk about Corey Heim. It all sounds like Corey Heim is another driver that could be moving up in 2025. With him being a reserve driver for 2311 and Legacy Motor Club, many are speculating that he is going to take over one of those rides if both teams do expand, like I said, because he's a reserve driver. Corey's done really well in his select races, substituting for Eric Jones this season. I do believe that Corey Heim is going to make the jump up to the Cup Series this upcoming season in 2025. He's been just doing a great job. He's been dominating trucks. I think he moves up in the 2025 season. Now let's move over to Ford Camp and talk about Riley Herbst. He's also a driver that could move up this upcoming season as well. Riley brings sponsorship from Monster Energy, and there's a chance he may not be back at SHR this year. He could go to Ricker Racing, could go to RFK. He also could go to another team like the Wood Brothers, perhaps, if Harrison Burton doesn't return. He brings sponsorship funding to the table, which is something they need, and no disrespect to Harrison Burton, I think Riley Herbst is overall a better driver. Riley could be moving over there. Let's move over to Riley Herbst's teammate in Xfinity, Cole Custer. Cole Custer's name also gets mentioned as possibly a moving up next season. He doesn't bring a lot of sponsorship to the table, but if Gene Haas sells his stuff and Joe Custer leaves as well, I think Cole Custer's going to be looking to drive for a new team. He's driven his select starts RFK Racing in the past, drove for Ricker Racing, which has an alliance with RFK, so he could be someone that goes over to that team in 2025. Let's now talk about Sammy Smith. According to Bob Pockers, Sammy Smith could also move up in 2025. Sammy Smith brings sponsorship funding to the table. I could see him going to Spire Motorsports, and Michael McDowell does not end up going there, but we could see Sammy Smith potentially move back up to the NASCAR Cup Series in the not-so-actually move up to Cup for the first time. He's got a lot of talent and brings funding from Pia Flying J and Peterbilt as well. Let's go to his teammate in Xfinity, Sam Mayer. Sam Mayer's name has been mentioned as a candidate to move up full-time in Cup. If Junior Motorsports jumps up full-time next year, I think Sam Mayer takes over the seat. If not, he could go to the 71 car for Spire Motorsports. He's mentioned for that seat. He's a great driver, great talent, doing a great job in Xfinity. He's already won 5 career races in the last 25, 30 races in Xfinity. I think Sam Mayer could be someone that is moving up next season. Let's move on and talk about Ryan Truex. Ryan Truex, of how well he's been doing in Xfinity, he could be full-time in the Xfinity Series in 2025, but there is also a chance that Ryan Truex could be in the Cup Series next year, taking over for Martin Truex Jr., his brother. Ryan's already won 2 races. I think there is something to watch for when it comes to him because he could be looking to go full-time in the Xfinity Series in the 2025 season with JGR and Joe Gibbs Racing. Let's move on and talk about Carson Quaffle. Carson Quaffle earlier today was announced he's going to run 6 more Xfinity races with Junior Motorsports, and there is some talk that he could be racing full-time with Junior Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year. He's been doing an excellent job. He's going to run a lot more races. He's probably going to win more races by the end of this season. I do think it's going to get called at some point that Carson Quaffle is going to be running full-time. Dale Jr. likes him a lot, and he's bringing sponsorship and funding over into the table. Finally, let's talk about Richard Childress Racing. They're looking to expand next year to 3rd car. They're one of the teams that is looking to expand. There's been rumors and rumblings they could, and I think they're looking at moving Austin Hill full-time up despite having a 2-year contract in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. So those are the big NASCAR silly season moves that have taken place in the rumors and rumblings. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let's go more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What are thoughts about all the major moves? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're having NASCAR news. We'll be discussing news over the course of the last couple of days. We're going to have Truck and Xfinity Series race picks as well, more than likely. Then on Wednesday or Thursday, we'll have Cup Series race picks. If any major news breaks throughout the week, we'll discuss it here. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more good, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.